Good evening, and welcome to our program, created especially for you, our museum members. Thank you for your membership and for joining us tonight. I'm Billy Smith, Associate Director of the Helmrich Center for American Research here at Gilcrease Museum. I'm joined by my colleague, Allison Rossi, the Anne and Henry Zero Director of Learning and Community Engagement here at the museum. Tonight, we are really excited to share a sneak peek of the work our team at Gilcrease has done over the past 2 years on the Eddie Faye Gates Tulsa Race Massacre collection, supported by a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. But before we get started, I want to encourage you to help us to make this evening interactive by asking any questions you have. In order to ask a question, just please click the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and type in your question. You can enter them at any time, and we'll conclude tonight's program by doing our best to answer them. Again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Let's get started. And so tonight, we'd like to take a quick moment to thank the Institute of Museum and Library Services, IMLS, for making this project possible. And we'd also like to say thank you to the family of Eddie Faye Gates for donating her collection to Gilcrease Museum in 2020. It has been a profound honor to learn more about and celebrate Mrs. Gates' amazing life and work through this collection, and to make it available to the public. And to that point, as the project director for this CARES Act grant, I would like to say a huge thanks to Susan Neal, to everyone on our Eddie Faye Gates project team at Gilcrease who helped realize the vision for this grant through their tireless work, expertise, and dedication. And we're also grateful to many other community partners who supported this work. Thank you so much. So tonight, we are really excited to share this sneak peek of the work that we've been doing to bring this wonderful collection to the broader public. And it's important to say that this is a sneak peek as we are still in a soft launch phase of this work, meaning that our team is still working to add, refine resources, to find and work out bugs, and to fine tune aspects of what appears online. So look forward to hearing more about and exploring parts of this collection for yourself as we prepare for a full public launch of this work in May. And so as a roadmap for tonight, I'll share a brief overview and background about Mrs. Gates and this project. We'll take a look at the anthology page for this Gates collection. I'll show you what it looks like to browse the collection items in Gilcrease Online Collections and our new public finding aid display. And then I'll hand it over to Allison to share more details about our K-12 teaching guides. I'll tell you about some exciting new educational articles on the anthology page, and then we'll leave some time for questions and answers. But first, let's step back a little bit and have a little bit of background about Eddie Faye Gates, her collection, and the IMLS grant before we dive into the online resources. The Eddie Faye Gates Tulsa Race Massacre collection contains materials that reflect the life and 40-year public career of Eddie Faye Gates, a contemporary African-American woman, educator, historian, author, and community activist. Gates taught at Edison Senior High School in Tulsa for 20 years and became the social studies curriculum coordinator at the Tulsa Public School System. After retiring in 1992, she entered a new phase of her career and published 3 books. In 1994, Gates worked with award-winning photographer Don Thompson, supported by funds from the Oklahoma Historical Society, to document and record interviews with notable people and places in North Tulsa. And they produced an exhibit, Oral Histories, and one of Gates' books as a result. In 1998, Gates was appointed to the Oklahoma Commission to study, as it was called then, the Tulsa Race Riot of 1921. And served as chair of the Survivors Committee. And in that role, she labored to locate, interview, and recover the experiences of more than 200 survivors of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre and gathered information from more than 300 of their descendants. The collection itself dates from the early 20th century to approximately 2010, and it contains photographs, correspondence, handwritten research notes, newspaper clippings, recorded audio, video materials, including oral history interviews with survivors and descendants of the massacre, interviews with various Tulsa community members, and it also includes broadcast television interviews documenting Gates' vigorous efforts to publicize her work with survivors. The IMLS grant is a CARES Act grant, and it was meant to enable museums to serve their communities during the beginning of the pandemic. And as we all experience, people around the world were cut off suddenly from accessing museums and cultural institutions in person. Institutions like Gilcrease during that moment saw a tremendous uptick in people visiting online collections. And so with the gift of this collection from the Gates family in 2020 and the centennial remembrance of the Tulsa Race Massacre in 2021, this grant envisioned bringing digital access to this important cultural resource and history to our local community of Tulsans, Oklahomans, and beyond. So in short, this grant made it possible for our team to do the following: to do the necessary archival work to make the collection available for individual research. And this included physically processing the collection items, arranging them, rehousing, inventorying, describing, cataloging, and evaluating materials for conservation treatment. Michelle Smith, who is our IMLS archival processing intern on the project, worked to archive and organize the collection. We collaborated with a committee of advisors, scholars. Dr. Autumn Brown served as the IMLS research scholar and helped identify people, places, events, and thematic interconnections within this collection. And then more than just digitizing, this grant has really enabled us to build our technological capacity at the museum to help make, in this early stage, the video interviews and photographs from the collection available online. And so this work is really laying the foundation for one day digitizing even more from the collection. Working together, our archives and digital curation teams uploaded audio-visual files, they imaged and transferred hundreds of photographs, and created item records within our new archival software. And so this work has allowed for a redesign of our online collections display for archival materials. Allison and her team on the education side worked to bring this collection to our community by developing teaching resources for K-12 educators and students. She helped also with our team create a collections anthology page, curricular materials, a multi-day teacher institute on teaching trauma-based history and resilience. Angela Guillory, our IMLS administrative assistant, helped coordinate these efforts by communicating with local stakeholders and partnering with organizations. And then lastly, in honor of Mrs. Gates' cross-generational work as a teacher and a historian, our team worked with local community members. We hired teams of 4 elders from the community and 4 youth, high school students, to help us in our digital efforts by tagging and providing comments and context for 4 video files, which contain multiple interviews per file and more than 250 photographs in the collection. So we'll say more about that. But with that, we'll go ahead and turn our attention to these resources. So this is our anthology page for the collection. The anthology page serves as the entry point and really the central hub for the Gates collection, including direct links to the collection items themselves, highlighted photo video clips. We have a link to our new finding aid for research, our K-12 teaching guides, which you'll hear more about from Allison, educational articles written by experts on the project about notable people and themes in the collection. You'll also find our recorded annual lectures from 2021 and 2022, which were delivered by Dr. Autumn Brown. So let's take a closer look at what exploring the collection looks like. So here is a static image of what kind of search result you'll get when you click on the main collections link from the anthology page. We currently have 679 photographs and 28 video files viewable, so footage that contains multiple interviews per file, available to view in online collections. Some of the videos in the collection are restricted due to copyright, and so they can't be shown online, but these are all viewable if you schedule a visit to the Helmrich Center for American Research in person at one of our listening stations in the reading room. In this slide that you can see, there's a great representation of the types of photos included in this collection. Here we can see notable leaders, including people like Pocahontas Gredington, who's in the top right corner here. She was a leader in education in Tulsa Public Schools, a mathematics educator, administrator. She published textbooks, a really amazing person whose oral histories are also in the collection. But you can also see famous jazz musicians. Clarence Love is centered here in the top area, these two pictures of him. You see historical photos, and these are often of people within Eddie Fay Gates' own family. And then we see pictures of Mrs. Gates herself. Here in the upper top left-hand corner, you see a picture of Mrs. Gates herself on her way to Poland as part of a TPS Teachers Fellowship program to study the Holocaust. A picture of her also in the top left-hand corner at a book signing. And then if you go to the next page, you'll see some well-known figures, including Dr. John Hope Franklin here in the middle. On the far left, you'll see Reverend Benjamin Harrison Hill, who was an instrumental leader, a minister, an educator and administrator, and also a state representative. The Reverend B.S. Roberts, who ministered at the St. John's AME Church. You can see Robert Fairchild, who was a survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre, and his oral history is also within this collection. You can even see more from the robust collection of jazz and blues history within this collection. In the top right-hand corners, you can see Alfred Stanley Denny and the Jap Allen's Cotton Club Orchestra. And then in the far right corner, top right corner, you see Ernie Field's orchestra. And so music is a major part of this collection. So let's take a peek at what our video display looks like. Here you can see a video record of a series of interviews within the collection. These interviews were with Tulsa Race Massacre survivors, and it was called The Survivor Stories. So you can see at the top, the title displayed. There is a playable video there, and on the right, you can see the record data. Now, when you scroll down on this record, you can see that we have added video chapters with hyperlinks that will take you to that particular individual's interview. And now it's important to say this won't be available for all videos, but it is ongoing work, and it's something that is a goal for our team to keep working toward adding these features for videos that are playable. And then if you scroll down a little further on this record, you can find here contextual comments from one of our community experts who helped us tag the videos and photos in the collection. This particular comment, I think, is a really special one, as it provides background from the son of State Representative Don Ross, Mr. Kevin Ross, who worked with Mrs. Gates as the videographer for these survivor interviews when he was a young man. So we were really fortunate to have had such wonderful community elders, many of whom knew and worked with Mrs. Gates personally. And we had brilliant community high school students on this project. We got to see some really amazing relationships formed as a result of this work. So let's take a closer look at a photograph record. So here is a photo of Representative Don Ross himself. He is posing with Augusta Mann, Shirley Scoggins, and State Senator Maxine Horner, all seated at the Oklahoma State Capitol for a luncheon. Now, as you're looking at this, if you scroll down, you can find more comments and tags from our community experts. And by tags, I mean digital search terms. These words, these terms enable people to search more effectively through our online collections. And so you can see here that at the top, we have some comments, some context about this particular photo from Kevin Ross again, as well as his tags. And these are just words to help describe what you're seeing in the record. And so when someone searches for any of these kinds of terms, they'll be able to find these images, these records in our online collections. You can also see in the middle, Monticello Driver. She provided her own tags, was another elder community expert on this project. And then at the bottom, you can see our youth tags from one of our high school students, LaQuincia Brown. And it's been really fun to see what they notice about these photographs, what they notice about these videos. And so with that, let's take a glimpse at our new finding aid display. And this will be accessed through the anthology page. Now, for anyone who might not know, the finding aid is really a research tool for anyone looking to dive into the collection. And so it includes a comprehensive scope note about what's contained in the collection. It has a biographical note about Mrs. Gates. And then one particularly nifty tool that we're really excited about. Here you can see right next to download that there is a hyperlink that will allow anyone to download a CSV spreadsheet to your computer containing a list of collection item records. And so we're really excited about that because we believe that this will help anyone who's wanting to do research in the collection narrow down their searches and kind of strategize their research visits at HCAR. If you scroll down on the finding aid, you'll see an expandable accordion section for series within the collections. And so this includes audio materials, audio visual materials, and photographs. And let's say that you click on the audio visual materials. It's going to expand even further to sub-series of collection items. And as you work your way through this, you'll find links to collection items, including videos, which will take you to that record in the online collections. And so we're really excited about that. But for now, I'll stop and hand this over to my colleague, Allison, to share a little more about the exciting K-12 teaching guides.
Thank you so much, Billy, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for your interest in learning more about the project. It's really been a rewarding process to be part of the team working with and interpreting the Eddie Fay Gates collection. We began developing teaching guides for the project following the successful Teacher Institute we hosted in July of 2021, focused on the Eddie Fay Gates collection and the topic of teaching hard histories in the classroom. Around 30 Tulsa Public Schools educators joined us for that institute, and we learned more about their classroom needs through working with them during those sessions. All 4 guides were a product of collaboration between our team and Tulsa Public Schools educators Akila Leach and Amanda Sullivan, both of whom played a key role in developing curriculum for the district surrounding the Tulsa Race Massacre. And that was really useful in ensuring that we weren't duplicating any district efforts and were really adding new, valuable, classroom-friendly learning resources. I also want to give a shout out to Angela Guillory, who was part of the project team and who played a key role in the development of these guides. The 4 teaching guides are accessible from the main project anthology page, and they have their own landing page. And Billy, we can go ahead and scroll to the next slide. We knew that it would be important to develop teaching guides for educators and students from different grade levels who have very distinct needs. So we created one guide for early elementary, one for upper elementary, one middle school guide, and one high school guide. Well, first and foremost, we wanted these guides to be accessible to and useful for educators and students in our own community, we recognize that the stories and lessons here have national and even international resonance and can be accessed by anyone searching the web. We can go to the next slide. Here you can see all of the content featured on the teaching guides anthology page, though the real page is much more aesthetically pleasing with photographs and a nice organized layout. Visitors to the page will see an overview of what all the guides include. That's what's at the top here, as well as a title for and short description about each individual guide. The early elementary guide has strong connections with literacy, which is critical for our youngest learners. Students meet Eddie Faye Gates and examine photos and watch video footage that include the Mabel B. Little Heritage House in Greenwood. They hone their observation skills, they create their own time capsule, and discuss the passage of time. The upper elementary teaching guide introduces students to oral histories and their importance as they compare survivor accounts of the Tulsa Race Massacre. The middle school guide directly addresses the impact of the Tulsa Race Massacre on survivors and how the survivors showed resiliency despite the tragedies they experienced. Next, we'll take a closer look at the high school guide together. Next slide, please. The high school teaching guide really centers around the work of Eddie Faye Gates and the commission, who are working to record accounts from Tulsa Race Massacre survivors, many of whose stories had not really been told at all or rarely shared beyond close family members or friends. Amanda Sullivan was the primary author of this guide, and her credit line is below the photograph here. Since all of the guides are lengthy, it was important that we organize them thoughtfully, and we worked with local educators to develop a user-friendly template. To the right, the menu allows for users to select specific elements of the guides and to view the teaching guide by section. We also heard from teachers how important it is to have the ability to print a lesson, so we added that feature here. Next slide, please. The learning objectives lay out immediately what it is we aim for students to learn through engagement with the activities outlined in the teaching guide. In this case, you can see that we wanted them to describe how a conspiracy of silence developed following the massacre and how actions by the Oklahoma Commission to study the race riot of 1921 took to uncover the history and consequences of the event. We also wanted them to use oral histories from the Tulsa Race Massacre survivors to consider how history is written and to be able to explain how oral histories provide authentic perspectives to the massacre. The guiding questions act as a sort of refrain that the educator and students can return to throughout their engagement with this content and really reinforce the inquiry-based approach to learning. So you can see here we have two guiding questions for this high school guide. What role did the Oklahoma Commission to study the Tulsa Race Massacre have in ending the conspiracy of silence around the massacre? And how can we learn about the Tulsa Race Massacre using oral histories from survivors? Next slide, please. Billy already talked about this a little bit, but I want to go back in time to the moment in which we applied for the IMLS grant that funded this project. It was spring 2020, only a couple of months into the pandemic. And the CARES grant asked applicants to be responsive to the impact of COVID on the audiences that we serve. And so we really thought about our Oklahoma audiences that we serve here and our students and educators in this area above all. In my part of that grant, a 2017 national survey of children's health conducted by the U.S. Census Bureau found that 30% of Oklahoma children had experienced trauma or two or more adverse childhood experiences known by the acronym of ACE or ACEs. ACEs can include anything like abuse, neglect, poverty, violence, the loss of caregivers and culture, and also things like natural disasters and discrimination of all kinds. Earlier surveys have found Oklahoma children ranked #1 in the percentage of children who have experienced trauma. At over 10 percentage points above the national average, Oklahoma has consistently ranked high among U.S. states for childhood trauma over the past 2 decades. With nearly 1/3 of Oklahoma children affected by long-term trauma, their ability to work, their health, and even their life expectancy are compromised. According to Robert Block, former president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, adverse childhood experiences are the greatest unaddressed public health threat facing our nation today. So before COVID, We already had a strong rationale for offering pedagogical programming responsive to the traumas experienced by our community, and that could help facilitate healing. Trauma experienced in the past, of course, continues to impact Oklahoma residents and our teachers and students, from the forced removal of tribes to the Tulsa Race Massacre. These teaching guides don't just cover traumatic history, they cover the history in our own backyard that continue to affect us today. The Teacher Institute and the teaching guides engage with these local histories and follow empathetic and inquiry-based pedagogical approaches that incorporate a focus on resilience that benefit anyone who has experienced trauma, whether from COVID or other factors. Here you can see examples of trauma-informed practices in the high school guide, where we ask the teachers to prepare for hard topics in the classroom by considering their own comfort levels, by creating classroom norms, and providing students the opportunity to process and reflect on the content. And in preparation for integrating trauma-informed practices into the work we did for the Teacher Institute and in the teaching guides, our staff collaborated with and had training by the TU Titan Trauma Institute, the Tri-City Collective, and Sites of Conscious, all who have trauma-informed backgrounds and expertise to share with us. Next slide, please. The activities section comprises the bulk of each teaching guide. Several different classroom activities have been created for each guide, and teachers can use all or just pick and choose those that will work best in their classrooms. The high school teaching guide begins with a warm-up activity where students think broadly about why people may choose to hide the truth about their history or choose to not share something bad that happened to them. They jot down responses, pair up with a partner, and share those responses. Then the class transitions to focus on how this applied to the Tulsa Race Massacre, and they do some background reading. Students then actively listen to and write about short video clips featuring Eddie Faye Gates as she recounts the tasks of the Race Riot Commission and explains why interviewing survivors is critical to their work. The class then watches interviews with survivors, reflects, and discusses the prompts that you see above. The activities section concludes with a writing prompt that asks students to quietly journal using the SIT or SIT strategy. What did they find? S, surprising, I, interesting, and T, troubling, and then to engage in a class discussion. Next slide, please. You can see here a clip of an interview with survivor Eldoris Mikandichi, one of several video interview clips that students watch as part of their learning activities in the high school guide. Note that this is a 23-second clip, and it's one of many pulled from much longer videos. Teachers we spoke with requested that we create many short clips for classroom use and that we post these on YouTube for easy access. Although this was not part of our original plan, we wanted to be responsive to educator and student needs, especially following the challenges with COVID in the classroom. So Joseph Carragher on our digital curation team ended up creating about 20 clips just for this purpose that I added to YouTube. And these are accessible only through the guides, these particular short clips without a bunch of context. Next slide, please. Oftentimes, educators need justification to include content and activities in their curricula. So we knew it would be essential to align activities in the teaching guides with both local and national learning frameworks. You can see that the Oklahoma content standards we included for high school are social studies specific and include both general skills as well as learning outcomes that focus on the history of Greenwood and the Tulsa Race Massacre. You may be less familiar with the national C3 framework, and C3 stands for college, career, and civic life. That aligns with the Common Core used throughout the country and has been adopted by the National Council for Social Studies. This is an inquiry-based approach to social studies education. We hope that both Oklahoma teachers and educators around the country can utilize these teaching guides and that integrating these frameworks help them legitimize doing so. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to address our efforts to make the teaching guides as inclusive as possible, especially following the learning and classroom challenges associated with COVID that we've heard so much about from our teachers and students. Here you can see that we've suggested scaffolding the activities so that students who may struggle with listening and comprehension have additional steps built in to ensure that they are understanding. We've also recommended that students complete sentences or paragraphs that the teacher provides to more easily facilitate active listening and writing. We are so grateful for the work of our project team in completing these teaching guides and feel very fortunate to have worked with Akila Leach, Amanda Sullivan, and Angela Guillory, all veteran classroom teachers, to create content that is user-friendly and facilitates learning, most importantly, from the Eddie Fay Gates collection. We look forward to sharing their good work. And in fact, tomorrow morning, I'll be talking with all of the social studies teachers across the Tulsa Public Schools District about the Eddie Fay Gates collection and these teaching guides. Thank you for your time and interest, and I look forward to answering questions at the conclusion of our presentation.
Thanks so much, Allison, for sharing that. And finally, I want to point out that we have some great educational articles available on our anthology page for the collection as well. These were written by Gilcrease staff, grant partners, and our advisory committee members on the grant project. So currently we have 5 articles, and we plan to add more in the future. These include biographical highlights of key people in the collection, including Mrs. Gates herself, Don Thompson, and his work with Mrs. Gates, Lieutenant Colonel Major Clark and his military career. We have an article about Maxine Horner and Don Ross, and how their work also facilitated that of Eddie Fay Gates. And we also have an article written by an advisor on the project, Jack D. Baker, about the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre and Cherokee freedmen. It provides a fascinating look at the possible research avenues within this collection and beyond. And so we're excited to share these with you, and we hope that you all will visit them, and look forward to hearing more in May as we make this big public launch of the work. And with that, we'd like to just thank you so much for your time tonight, for listening, and for your interest in this work. We'd love to receive any of your questions and try to give answers to those.
Thank you so much, Billy and Allison. This is Leslie Bonaventura, Associate Director of Development here at Gilcrease, and we do have a few questions for you. First off, we have what feedback have you had from educators about their ability to teach about the Tulsa Race Massacre since the passage of House Bill 1775?
That is a great question. So right after that bill was passed, we began advertising for our Teacher Institute and putting word out about what was happening and trying to get teachers to come. And not only were we covering the Tulsa Race Massacre, but we were talking about the history of freedmen. We were talking about, which means slavery in tribes, in the 5 tribes. We were also talking about forced removal of tribes to Indian territory. So all of that could potentially be a challenge with House Bill 1775. And we were really concerned that nobody would sign up for the Teacher Institute. And that's not what happened at all. We had a great turnout for the Institute, and we had even more people sign up than were able to eventually end up attending. But my understanding is that the Tulsa Public Schools, went through with teaching content about the Tulsa Race Massacre. They continue to teach about the Tulsa Race Massacre. And parents, as a Tulsa Public Schools parent myself, I know that parents can choose to opt out of sessions that include content that some parents may find troubling or controversial. So that's a great question for the district as well. I hope that gives you some information, though.
Definitely. So our next question is, how did you find and choose the elders and the youth that you worked with on this project?
Yeah, that's a great question. So really, we worked very closely as a project team, but also another shout out to Angela Guillory, who helped connect us with people in the community and also kind of spread the word about this project. And so we invited applications from anyone who was particularly interested in this work. We asked them to share a little bit about their background and their connection to Tulsa and North Tulsa. And then we met with these people, these applicants, and learned a little bit more about their stories, and found high school students who were incredibly engaged within the Tulsa community. We learned about elders from the community who had known Eddie Faye Gates and worked alongside her in many different contexts, as well as people who were just deeply rooted within the North Tulsa community. And so we had more applicants than we had room for on the project, unfortunately, but we plan to continue this work and bring in community members to share their expertise and to help us learn about this collection and others. So that's really what the process looked like.
Thanks, Billy. We have a couple more questions about the teaching guides. One is, how did you choose the clips for YouTube for the teaching guides?
We knew that we needed to have short video clips. The teachers that we talked with, this is one of the challenges that they shared post-COVID when we were creating these guides, not post-COVID, but when students really were returning to the classrooms after being out of classrooms in Oklahoma and in Tulsa Public Schools specifically. That attention span was fairly short for students, and that we needed to make sure that if these were usable classroom resources, whether it's something that we are embedding in a learning management system, which Canvas is that for Tulsa Public Schools, that students were experiencing on their own or under the care of a classroom teacher, that they really needed to be short, manageable clips. And so we really first went through the content itself, decided what we felt like would work well with the content standards, for both the district and those national standards for middle and high school. And then thought about what is essential in this clip to be able to share to help the students learn. So many of those videos, as Billy shared, are really long videos, and having what's that 30-second or 1-minute nugget that we can share that would be really impactful. And we ended up having many, many short video clips as opposed to just a few longer ones. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Allison. And then another question about the teaching guides is, the Oklahoma academic standards change periodically. Do we have plans to update the curricular materials when those are updated? For example, a slide show the term riot instead of massacre, which may actually be a little bit of a different question.
Yes, those are two different questions. We will do our best to update those guides to align with the Oklahoma academic standards. I know some of the social studies standards have just changed, and the Tulsa Public Schools curriculum. In fact, we're working with Tulsa Public Schools right now to revise their Oklahoma history curriculum and have the Gilcrease collection integrated into that. But absolutely, it's important for us to stay abreast of what's happening with state standards and national standards, and to be able to change things and be responsive to the degree that we can. As far as that nomenclature of riot versus massacre, that was part of one of the guides that we shared there. We felt like it was important to be able to explain why we use the term riot in some cases, and why it was used in the videos that the students would be watching, because of course now they're taught that it's the Tulsa Race Massacre, and that's the term that's used. So we wanted to give that background information for that.
Thanks, Allison. And you may have shared this or may have just mentioned it in your answer to that question, but has this curriculum already been implemented in TPS?
So this is Gilcrease curriculum. I should underscore that this lives on our website. It was created by our project team. We paid Tulsa Public Schools educators as a separate job to work with us to do this. We felt like they were really well qualified. They knew our audiences better than anyone. They've been in the trenches. So they really came to us as experts, not as collaborators from the district. And though they will likely be sharing this through their portals, this is not necessarily their curriculum. This is Gilcrease Museum curriculum that we hope Tulsa Public Schools teachers, Oklahoma teachers, regional teachers, and teachers and students around the world can connect to and access.
Thank you, Allison. This one's not a question, it's actually a note from an attendee. It says Eddie Faye was actively involved in and served as president of the Oklahoma Council for the Social Studies, offering statewide professional development, and they hope that that will be reflected in her biography. Okay, and then one more question is, what can you tell us about what's next for the collection? What's the next phase of this work?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something as a team we're continuing to talk about. There's lots of work to do, and there's also lots of options. One of the things that we found most compelling and a really all around compelling project was our engagement and work with community members. And while our community members worked with us for several months, they really only were able to scratch the surface of the collection. As I mentioned, 250 photographs of almost 700 photographs together, and then 4 video files. So we would love to continue that type of work, and what that looks like, we're still thinking about, but are really excited to do that. And then outreach with educators as well and students, and making this available.
Thank you, Billy. So those are all the questions we have. So if you could take us to the next slide, Billy, I can let, oh, wait, we've got one more. I have heard that Mrs. Gates rewrote the report of the Race Riot Commission after it completed its report. Can you address this rumor?
I don't think I've heard that, so I'm not sure, but I would be interested to know. So I will certainly dig into that. Thank you for that clue.
Thank you. Okay. So thank you both, Billy and Allison, for a great presentation. We're all looking forward to May, when we're going to be spreading this in the community, or spreading the word about this a little further, because it's been such a big project for our team. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We have a few upcoming events open to all and for members. The first is, if you may have seen around town, we have 31 installations of our pop-up exhibition, currently showing reproductions of Brummet echohawks and Island of the Redbuds on the Cimarron. You can find a map of all the sites and more information online on our website. We're also hosting our second annual Brewed for Gilcrease beer tasting event on Saturday, April 15th from 2 to 5 p.m. with VIP ticket buyers getting early access at 1 p.m. We have tickets available now online on our website, and proceeds from this event benefit Gilcrease. And we have 12 local breweries participating, and 3 food trucks and live music. It's going to be a great event. We also have our next virtual member event will be June 13th at 6 p.m. and that'll be an update from our Executive Director, Susan Neal. So we hope you'll be able to join us for these events and check out the pop-up exhibition. Thank you so much for your support of Gilcrease, and have a great rest of your evening. Thank you all. Bye.